maxing out 8 p.m. and leveling up. Skill shots, build orders, gotta gear up with legendary drops. So let's go and do the daily grind. Hey everyone, and welcome to the first podcast of the Daily Grind. Brand new IP, so to speak, from myself, Sean Kopp, and Miles Eshenique.
Hello.
We'll be co-hosting this bad boy. Originally came up as a concept to spend a little bit more time talking to each other and also examining sort of what it means to be a gamer as life continues onwards. What do you think about where this podcast is headed, Miles?
You know, we talked a lot in college, my roommates and I, about how we would make the transition into the workforce and potentially a marriage and children and maintaining a family while also maintaining your sense of identity and your passions and your hobbies, and not just related to gaming but anything else that might stem up as a result of that. So, you know, I was thinking we could talk kind of about some more of the intellectual or deep and more profound kinds of media that we consume. You know, it's not just gaming. We have some TV shows and movies that we consider to be, I don't know, that have altered our path and the way we've thought about things and impacted us.
Yeah, so. And it even extends beyond entertainment. You know, it's hobbies in general. Obviously, we'll go into a little bit of our backstories here in a moment, but obviously I'm very passionate about beer, home brewing, have obligations that I love performing, you know, to my family, to my wife and daughter. And it's just about sort of, preserving that sort of identity that's tied to entertainment and to our friends, most importantly. Because if it were solo gaming, I feel like it would drop off quite quickly. Here we stand. So as far as what you can expect from this podcast, I think we're looking to have many discussions about what it means to be a gamer as an adult as we enter manlyhood. I'm sure that some podcasts will venture into the deeper and perhaps more inquisitive discussions, but also we might have a situation as well where we are discussing, you know, just games for a whole episode. So always a guess, I think, what we're gonna be talking about.
I think it'll be like as new games come out that we're really hyped up about, that'll probably tend to dominate the conversation for that episode or maybe the next couple of episodes as big releases come out. And
that's kind of how it is. I mean, we all know, you know, when the new game comes out, we're excited about playing it. Other responsibilities go on hold, other games go on hold, other forms of entertainment. So it only makes logical sense.
Yeah, no, it's funny how we've talked about this before too, outside of any sort of recording, but just how our group as a whole kind of it's like it's like the tide. It rolls in when new releases come in. We all kind of touch base and have a sort of better sense of community, and then after the excitement and the hype for that game dies off, then we go our separate ways. We kind of shift back into our core interests as gamers and as people, really. Yeah.
So I think before we get into it, that's part of a subject that we definitely want to talk about on our pilot episode. But I think even before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about ourselves. Miles, you want to give a little bit of your backstory and sort of how we came to meet and just a little bit about yourself?
So I'll start out with me, but the backstory between Sean and myself is kind of a interesting one. I grew up in a small town and kind of got into gaming when, I don't even remember, I think we had a NES and then graduated.
You've told me the story that your dad got you into it, right?
Yeah, and
in some ways,
you know, we would game, and then when dial-up internet came around, we kind of started to make our way into that. But before then, I remember we would kind of stay up and sneak back out to the living room after we had gone to sleep, quote unquote, and we'd play, and then we'd try and keep it down, and then sneak back to bed. But I just remember that, and Prince of Persia on our old Apple computer, and it's funny how it kind of has progressed. But we definitely in terms of the internet, that was always such an interesting dynamic for living where we did. We would have to run ridiculously long phone lines, not Ethernet. This is before then.
Oh yeah.
And we'd have to dial in and everything, and if
I
someone
remember
called,
that back in like the Command and Conquer days.
yeah, we would
sure.
play Age of Empires with a couple of our friends, and it was just funny because whenever anyone would call, you'd be disconnected, obviously, and it was like, oh, damn it.
I know.
We played Diablo 2 and on PvP, and it was just, it was really interesting, and we always felt super kind of constrained in a way because we could never really play at like a competitive level. We never could really. It was kind of always compensating for lag, and it was just interesting to have that when our friends would talk about gaming. And so we would. Another thing we would do is after we got our cars, we would have to drive. We would commute we'd make some kind of pilgrimage to a game for a weekend or whatever it may be, and we'd haul all of our gear and have a couple of sweaty, stinky boys. I don't think anyone ever would shower for the duration of the weekend.
Why would you?
Just waste cutting into that precious time. Yeah, so it's just been such an integral part of my life, gaming, and I don't know. I remember the very first game that I ever beat was The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and it was just such a defining moment because I had never beaten a game. I'd played games and never gotten to the end, and this was the one that took probably a couple months. I remember I just quit at one point during the water temple, and I just I can't figure this out. So I ended up caving and using a walkthrough for the water temple part because it was just so hard to get all the kind of order of operations to get myself out of there. But moving forward, I moved into college, and that was when I really kind of got into a point where I had a consistent internet connection and I could patch and be up on the time, so to speak, and just playing with my roommates. And here's how I met Sean. We were playing a game called League of Legends. It's kind of an indie
Very
game.
small
I don't know
game,
if you ever heard of it. Yeah.
I think Steam greenlit it a little bit ago.
Yeah, it was in the it was in the alpha for a while and then beta, and it's still really on the lowdown kind of, but
they use it in college courses to show how free to play doesn't make any money and nobody should try it.
Right, it's like a cautionary tale, really.
Yeah.
But so we were playing League of Legends one time, and we got into a lobby, and this guy auto-locks his Shaco after we'd already called a jungler and everything, and he says, oh, I'm going to support a Shaco. And so we're like, this guy, I don't know what it is we're going to do, but whatever, he's trolling, we'll just report him after the game.
And he still trolls to this day.
Oh, yeah, that's a given. That man's name is, it's Daniel Nash.
Daniel Sean.
We won handily, and then went on to invite him, and he brought in a friend called the Shanzi, and so we started playing, and that was kind of it. I mean, we clicked immediately, talking on Skype.
Our whole group too. I think me and Miles hit it off. More quickly than others, but the whole group had a great sort of vibe to it.
Well, you remember the game that was shortly after League of Legends, right?
Which one?
Shazbot.
Oh, Shazbot. Yeah, that was another defining moment.
So we played.
Oh, do you want to try another free to play game? Oh yeah, hell yeah, sign me up.
Yeah, so we got into a game called Tribes Ascend, and it's kind of a free to play shooter, but
so good.
It's a good game. Yeah, it's fast. It's very reminiscent of Unreal Tournament and Doom and Quake, that genre of, or era rather, of gaming, FPS
the Twitch shooters.
Right. So, I mean, from there, it was kind of just like an obvious chemistry between the two of us and amongst the group really as a whole. We just kind of branched out and started talking about a lot of things, and Sean was with me I met Sean at a pretty challenging time in my life. I had gone through a breakup and then the death of my father, and then after that, it was graduation, so it was just kind of like boom, 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 and Sean and I, we just connected on it sounds kind of cheesy, but we connected on a pretty deep level, and then from there,
agree, especially at that point.
Right. I mean, it was kind of like really just a intense time, and then I kind of went offline in a sense when I moved back home. But Sean came out to California when we had our first DenCon, as we like to call it.
That was so fun. That was so
fun. I was watching the videos. You were so just hyped during that game of Resistance when
I was hyped. I was hyped all weekend.
Yeah, the bleed blue though was just it was so powerful.
We'll end up getting those pictures those videos on the website.
Yeah, we'll definitely put them on there for your enjoyment or cringing. I don't know. It depends. We'll see how you see it. But, I mean, since then, it's just kind of been an obvious friendship, really, and that expanded into Sean's brother, Chris. So, Chris moved out here to California, so now I have a cop in the neighborhood, so to speak.
You guys have hung out several times now.
Oh, yeah. There's been several times we've just like randomly like, what are you doing this weekend? And when he drives up or down, or he drives down and we drive up. Yeah, and so it's been a great like extension of Sean. It's just been a really fortuitous coming together of a bunch of like-minded people. And Daniel, the one we mentioned, Troll Shaco, actually went to our house. He came to our Thanksgiving when he was out here in California.
That's
so
right.
I mean, it's just been great. We all went to PAX together.
Yep.
So
yeah, we just made that happen, buckled down, and made it happen. So Miles, you want to explain to the people your very interesting job and what you do on a day-to-day basis besides gaming?
I think you're taking a little bit of liberty with interesting.
You're Batman, right?
Yeah, but I can't talk about that.
Okay.
So
I'll bleep it out.
Am what they call a category manager, and so basically I just work with a lot of data, and so I just run a lot of reports. I work for Green Giant Fresh, so it's pretty big. I think you may have heard of them, and we sell lots of vegetables and whatnot, and I just kind of sit in my corner and plugging away, and yeah, I mean, that's kind of it.
And if I did that job, I would be a vegetable.
Oh yeah, that's That's actually...
My mind also would be creamed corn.
Well, this is probably what we'll get into talking about at some point in the podcast, is just like the dynamic of entering the workplace and kind of being on point, so to speak, and poning so that you don't get kicked down to a bronze league or something in real life. I don't know.
Just like a basic functioning member of society.
Yeah.
Like, bottom line.
So...
Like, do what you want to do in your own time, but... You got about 40 hours to at least make the world function.
Right.
Anything else you want to share with the audience before
no,
I take the helm?
Yeah, I think, it's just, I'm a small town guy, and it's been an interesting road to be on. This, like, just I think my life's been pretty interesting.
I would hope your life's interesting, because otherwise we're going to lose a lot of...
We're going to go to the negative viewers, our listeners. I don't know how that works, but...
I think they actually... So when iTunes deletes your podcast, I think that's when you go to negative. Like, people are just like, wait, you used to listen to that? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's like... it's challenging. It's like the noise is sucked out of their head. Like, iTunes just like, give me that podcast back. You can't listen to that anymore.
Memory erased. The Men in Black show up.
Yeah. There's a lot of things I think this podcast is going to branch out into and touch upon, so I'm excited to see how we can reach out to our listeners and kind of share our insights.
And our friends, yeah.
And friends, yeah. But they've probably already heard us babble on about our philosophic ranting, so to speak. So I'm just excited to see what it is, what resonates with our listeners. So
yeah. And also what form this podcast take, because right now it's very malleable, Yeah. But we just knew that we wanted to do it. We wanted to do it on a regular basis, and we wanted to sort of examine what it takes to, just do a podcast and make content. That's one thing that I've been thinking about lately, and for the past couple of years, especially getting into like a really solid job and developing a trade and skill, is the idea of creating. We're in the day and age where it's all consumption, right? And there's a few people that are worshipped as, gods amongst men that create, and they create for a living, and they have a blast. You're looking at artists across the board. Obviously, more and more people are getting into just creation, with obviously the use of the web, all the information that's out there to just like pick up a hobby and start doing things. But that's always been one thing that I've always wanted to challenge myself on ever since I heard a few people talk about it. One of the guys was Tycho or Jerry Holkins from Penny Arcade. When he just says, let's sit down and create. I'm trying to create here. I just love that idea of like, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad or whatever, but let's take on some risk. Let's put ourselves out there and let's see what comes up on top. And even if you're not always successful, at least you're out there and you're pushing yourself. You're sort of testing limits. I feel like in some extension, that's what this podcast means to me and might mean in the future.
And to further upon that, when you talk about how everyone's so happy to consume, whether that's a new TV show that they want to binge watch on Netflix or a BuzzFeed article that is inevitably an aggregated sort of recycled from various corners of the internet. That's all it is. It's just an aggregate. And so, like you're saying, it's very empowering to create something. And at the same time, it is a little unnerving because you see how kind of just toxic the internet as a community can be towards that.
It can put you down really quick.
Yeah.
But the one thing, too, is the people that know you, and the people that have an invested relationship in you, if you do something of value, or like if you even just take risk on something that doesn't turn out that well, a lot of people are still like, holy shit, man, good for you. That's awesome that you made a podcast, you do a podcast, or like, oh man, like you brewed beer, or you wrote this poem's excellent. Like just that matter of creation, like it encourages other people too to kind of find that fulfillment.
Right, and in my experience in life has been, I've just never really considered myself entirely too creative, or just, I don't really hold myself in that high of regards. I don't think I'm mediocre, but I don't want to like build myself up too much on the same token. But then I'm told by other people that know and love me that I am actually a good guy as a person, and I'm a smart guy. And so when I actually come out of my shell and just put that, even when it's like silly, stupid little one-off poems or things I've written, and people say that was really good or that was really funny. So I think, like you're saying, you really do have to put yourself out there, and we're in a day and age that you can put yourself out there very easily.
So why wouldn't you?
Right. There, you have to kind of face the criticism of these anonymous people, but you also have to acknowledge, whatever compliments are doled out and the criticism and the feedback, and you build on that rather than like retreating back into your shell.
We also need to find a way, like, it's not just about creation too. It's not just about like throwing stuff that you make out there. It's about trying to make it of good quality and also finding happiness in it. That's what we're after in the end, is finding some sort of satisfaction. I suppose I ought to introduce myself at this moment. My name's Sean Kopp. I'm a brave Nordic man up in Minnesota.
You won't hear him, cite that he's from the north. This is probably the only time you'll ever hear him say that.
Probably, yeah. Because it's just a super impressive thing when people just find out. They're like, oh, is it cold up there? You're like, yep. But a little bit about myself. When I was younger, as far as my gaming history, my folks didn't really want me to play games. They saw it as obviously useless, and they were just, you should be outside, or you should be reading, and all that stuff. And of course I read and I played outside because they put limits on my gaming. But I think it was a few formative moments where playing things like Metal Gear Solid and Sonic the Hedgehog and Aladdin and Phantasy Star and things like, and Doom and things like that at these friends' houses that I had. Like we weren't really allowed to have these bigger systems, and so that was always very formative when it was like, oh my god, like, I get to go play Super Mario 3 over at my friend's house, and I just always had this sort of fascination of games and being like, and the challenge. So it finally came time when I came of age that I got a Game Boy. And we're talking the brick Game Boy, the gray one.
Not the Game Boy Color, right?
Yeah, no, we're talking about Game Boy. The boy of games. The
modifying suffixes.
Yeah. No, new Nintendo 3DS XL.
No lights, eyes.
This is just Game Boy. And so I played Tetris on it all the time, Super Mario World, Kirby's Dream Land, things like that. And then eventually, too, I knew my parents weren't going to throw down the change for N64, so just on a whim, I had asked my grandparents to buy me an N64.
Oh, no,
for Christmas. Oh, yeah, and they did. And it was funny, like, so I got it for Christmas with Super Mario 64. And I was like, oh, my God,
you broke the chain of command,
64! I did. But with great risk comes great reward. And it was funny, like, the reward was, oh, we got this N64. Oh, they love it. And so the next, let's see, it was January, the first week in January, after Christmas, my dad went out and bought Wayne Gretzky's 3D Hockey and Pilot Wings.
That's a good game.
Yeah, and he ended up just like, he liked the fights in Wayne Gretzky's 3D Hockey the most. He didn't really get the whole gaming thing. Like, eventually got into Gauntlet and things like that. But he did enjoy the experience of playing with his kids on video games for a while, at least, until his kids began to surpass him in skill.
Oh, that's the natural evolution of things.
Right, exactly. You need to, yeah. He could still run faster than us, but we were better at video games. So, in the end, I think it's a fair trade.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a wash. So, yeah, it turned into N64, and then when I got into high school, it ended up being... I bought a GameCube with my own money because I got my first job, and played the classics on there, Super Mario Sunshine, Resident Evil 4.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Resident Evil 4, yeah.
It's so good. But, yeah, you name it. Super Smash Brothers Melee, I played it on there. And then...
let me pause real quick.
Yeah.
We should share our ages, I think, because I didn't mention
Oh,
mine.
yeah, we should date ourselves. I suppose we're already dating ourselves in a way.
Right.
I'm 29. I was born in 1985.
And I am 25.
Born in 1989, then?
No, 90. I have an early birthday in January.
Got it. Okay. Wow, you are young.
Yeah.
And wow, I am old.
But
anyways.
Chris is older than me.
Yeah, that's
He has gray hair and stuff.
Yeah, well, that's mostly due to my folks, probably. But I would think after that, it was Grand Theft Auto 3 that I borrowed a friend's PlayStation 2 to play on. That was awesome. I ended up needing to get a PlayStation 2, got into things like Shadow of the Colossus, SOCOM, and speaking of dial-up, that was one that...
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, still took that.
You had to have an adapter that plugged in, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then even then it was spotty. Like, it was crazy. That was one big pile of garbage, that whole multiplayer thing.
Yep.
And then it even had, like, this voice command thing where you could, like... the headset would pick up and you'd be able to tell your troops, like, micromanage.
Right. That was, like...
That was cool.
One of the first... implementations of that, from what I remember. That was like a big, like, that and online. It was like, oh my god, you have the headset and you're really cool like these guys, and you're like talking to your squad. Yeah,
it was that, and then what was the Manhunt was a really cool implementation.
Is that the really violent one?
Yeah, it's really violent, and then you would have the headset, and you felt like, just because you were playing the game, like, you were so scared to make noise, because you could put the headset on, and then you would, like, if you made a noise, it would draw people over.
Oh, right,
but every now and then you would accidentally fart or something like that. You're like, yeah, and then guys are like, huh? And you're like, God,
You know what's, like, funny about that game in particular? Like, this just brought me back. For Manhunt, I remember that must have been like 12? I don't even know. When that game came out, I remember it was around, like, my birthday, and what I had gotten for my birthday was some white leather bracelets with those punk rock studs on them, the pyramid
just so
ones.
Corny.
Yeah. So that's what I remember about that game. That's
like, I look like Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh my god, so cringeworthy. But yeah, sorry to interrupt.
So other than that, it's just been like kind of console gaming for a lot. I absolutely dominated at Halo in high school, and then on into college. Played on Xbox, played on the 360 when it came out. So basically, since the N64, I've played about every system and most of the iconic classics on every one, except surprisingly for PS3. I did play some on PS3, but now it's pretty cool to be at a point in my life when I can be like, I'm going to have all the consoles. I'm not gonna buy them in the same year, but I'm gonna do it because I'm like, I've never been able to, and I think you and I were talking about that.
Right.
Where
Yep.
like, obviously there's sort of it does take a certain level of investment and certain level of like self-degradation to be like, I'm gonna have all these consoles and I'm gonna play all the games.
Yeah.
But like, there is something satisfactory to where like, when The Last of Us came out, I was like, well, a lot of people I'm saying, a lot of people I respect their opinions on are saying it's one of the best games of all time, and I don't get to play it. Same for the Uncharted stuff, that Naughty Dog stuff that really stands out. And so, those are things. Now, I just didn't want to be at that point where, like, if a system came out with a game that I had to play that was a truly sort of memorable experience, I wanted to be able to take part in it socially.
That was see, my justification for that was for getting all the consoles in this newest generation was, you know what? I have a job for the first time ever.
You're single.
And I'm single.
Right.
I've got quite a wealth of disposable income. Punny. No. So in my mind, it just made a lot more sense. Like, I'm going to buy all these things, and whenever anything really just spectacular hits the market, I'm going to pick it up, and my investment,
which hasn't been much at this point.
Yeah, which is a disappointment. But having the infrastructure having the freedom to do so is nice. But yeah, it like you said, it's a little like spreading yourself too thin in a way, both in terms of your free time and financially, because I mean, they are still expensive consoles when they are all added up. So
absolutely. But depending on the hours that you get, it could be seen as a way to entertain yourself, as far as cost analysis, which is, I know, something that you think about quite often.
That's pretty much literally my entire life. That's what I do 40 hours. That's what I get paid to do 40 hours a week. And
you can't bring your work home with you, Miles.
No, I think I've always kind of looked at things in kind of like as a time value proposition. Yeah, I mean...
So you'd be really good at firing people. You'd be like, oh, you know what? I know what $28,000 can buy me in a year, and you're not worth it.
Yeah, that's honestly probably... If I was a manager, I'd be probably kind of calculating and cold, maybe.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a lot of sympathy for people who, say, like, worked 2 jobs.
Right, but you don't have sympathy for people in general.
I wouldn't say that.
Or empathy. You definitely don't have empathy.
You think?
Sympathy, maybe.
I think I have stronger empathy than I do sympathy.
Maybe. But that's only because you hang around with a lot of people that are very like-minded. You're like, oh yeah, I empathize with you. Yeah, man, that sucks that you can't play games. You're like, oh yeah, yeah, that sucks. You're like, oh man, my wallet just got stolen. Man, that sucks to be you.
I don't know. I think I'm pretty empathic. It's all relative, I think.
That's right. Yeah. We live in a world of gray.
Yeah.
And there's more than 50 shades of it.
Right. I love sitting on fences too. I know
you do.
Yeah, it's my favorite stance to take. Well, fetish. I mean, yeah. Let's save that for another podcast or maybe off air.
Getting back on track, I got married in 2010 to my wife, and we have a daughter now, and then we actually lost the daughter at 28 weeks, so we were expecting 2 at this point. So that was life-changing, to say the least. So there's been definitely... my life's been pretty easy. Definitely there's been a few things that you just can't escape as far as heartbreak goes. When you sort of take that plunge in life, like, bad things will just happen to people. So that's where I'm at now. I'm also working a more career-driven job. I'm a certified Cicerone, a beer expert, essentially, working at a beer store, and that's definitely challenging because it's a small business, and so there aren't a whole lot of benefits or time off or anything like that, sick leave. It's definitely very rewarding because being a small business, I'm very critical to the success of the company, and that's very rewarding in itself. You know, like, you don't really feel disposable.
See, and that's like, to contrast with like my job, for example, where I'm very much removed from feeling that I make a difference, because ultimately I work with the bottom line, I work with numbers, and decisions are driven based on the reporting that I do.
Sure.
But I don't make those decisions, and I don't sit in on those meetings, per se. And so
you're the calculator.
That's exactly right. And so we've had this conversation before, and I've had this conversation with Chris as he's moved into the workforce over here in California, is that it's kind of like a constant state of feeling like, because when you don't feel that you're making a difference, you do tend to feel more expendable, because you're so far removed from the nitty gritty. I think that's interesting, and you seem to really, since you've started your job, I mean, I've never heard you speak ill of it. I've never heard you say, "Damn, this sucks." And,
it's very rewarding.
Yeah. So it's just interesting to see the difference in kind of just
your outlooks when it comes to work. Yeah.
It
is interesting because it's very crucial, especially as working men, not to like do the sexist card, but I mean, like, I think there is something to be said about, especially since just traditionally we're kind of set up right now with this, that obviously it's the exception today, but that there's still this like pullover from our parents and their parents, that the guy works and the woman can work, but if there's kids that need taken care of, you know, they'll be at home, and that'll be their job, so to speak. So I think that as guys, there is something rewarding, very especially to us, to work and be successful at it. That's something we can talk about in the future, and obviously that emotion extends to women as well, but I think that there is something to be said as far as how you're seen in the world. A few guys that I know are stay-at-home dads, made that decision because their wives were making better money, and the world views them in a certain way. They're like, what, you weren't successful, or like, you just suck at your work? It's like, no, I'm making the same decision that my wife might have needed to make if I was doing better at work financially than she was. So I think that's kind of interesting. Other than that, I homebrew. I enjoy reading when I can. I obviously enjoy video games. I spend most of my time probably on the PC and playing a few interesting games on consoles, and I think that we should talk about them. But first, Miles got a package in the mail from me.
Yes, I did. No, actually, it was from Amazon.
No, it was no, it was misleading. It's misleading. Maybe the name ripped off, but
you know that smile on the package they do with their little arrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was me. I was smiling when I got that package.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the little halfway smirk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I sent Miles some Minnesota beer, some of my favorites and some of Minnesota's finest beer. And we're drinking the same beer from a very small brewery in Minnesota by the name of Steel Toe. We're drinking their IPA. What do you think of it, Miles?
I have to say, I think it was the Abrasive Ale is what it's called.
Yep, from Surly last night. And I have to say, I like that one more. Yep.
It's just...
as you should.
Yeah, and so, but this one is equally lovely, not quite as oily, and doesn't stick on the palate quite as much.
No, it's a little bit more bright and a little bit more dank and grassy, for sure.
Yeah, I'm getting grassy and, like, grapefruit. You can tell me if I'm wrong, because you're the expert here.
No, well, but I usually get a lot of citrus off this beer, but the one thing is that yours is maybe about a month old, or maybe even more, and mine is super fresh because I got it at the store that works right by it, and I'm getting so much like marijuana off this beer. It is like super dank, and it smells like, oh yep, it smells like that, but I'm getting a lot of pine and a fair amount of citrus through that. But yeah, it's a very good beer. If you live in Minnesota, you should absolutely try it. I think that we might try and make it to this brewery when you guys actually come and visit, because that's coming up soon.
Yeah, that will be in... I'm getting all my days mixed up here. Let me...
I think it's about 9 weeks now.
May 27th through the 31st, I think.
Yeah, it's
we'll
about 2 months, yeah.
Need to double check on that, but
No, it's the 27th to the 30th.
Okay. I don't have my itinerary. Right. Chris is actually in charge of this one.
Yeah. Well, he and I have relayed the plans back and forth, so yeah, but that'll be super exciting. We'll maybe be able to record a podcast in person with some cool dudes and take a few pictures and go to some really fun places. And actually, I'll be turning 30 while you're here.
Oh my goodness.
So that's quite the milestone.
I'm concerned about that because we're going to drink you under the table by that point. When you get that ripe old age of 30, you're going to go to bed at like 10 and, that
sounds good. Yeah, I'll have my old man pajamas as a 30th birthday
and
present.
The hat, the little...
Yeah, the cap, with Ma in her kerchief and Sean in his cap.
So I'm...
Aaron wouldn't wear a kerchief, I don't think.
We'll power through.
Yeah.
What? So here's the thing.
There will be some glorious tales to be told.
What board games do you have lined up for us for this trip? Do you have anything?
I've been thinking about I've been thinking about a few different ones that I'd like to play. One of which is a relatively new release from Fantasy Flight Games here in Minnesota, which actually, we should try and make it out there. It'll be interesting. We'll see if we can do it. But they have the Star Wars license, and strategically only paid, at least at the beginning, for the for episodes 4, 5, and 6. So they focused on that era of Star Wars, and they have profited greatly from that. Now with the acquisition of Star Wars by Disney, now Fantasy Flight has sort of looped themselves into Disney's pockets as well. So they're making some very fine games right now, one of which is called Star Wars Imperial Assault. They made a game in the past which was fantasy themed. Imagine Dungeons & Dragons, the tactical combat of 4th edition, very like grid-based and mathematical, and they made that into a board game. Much more accessible than the huge rule set of D&D. Mm-hmm. And this is essentially the Star Wars version of that. You play with iconic characters, they come as allies, you play new characters to the franchise, sort of doing things behind the scenes as the movie's going on, and you're actually you can play out a story over missions, and it will present you with choices like there's a sort of Jedi in training kind of, and there'll be a side mission that you could take to go and find her lightsaber, or to go build a lightsaber, which is pretty cool because the other option might be equally lucrative, and it's also an option to fail these missions as well. So failing it will bring about a different outcome. So you have this sort of choose your own adventure kind of thing going on in the campaign based on your actions, and also based on the missions you decide to take next. So, and Fantasy Flight is really good about this because they release expansion after expansion to some of these games, and so they just keep going after your wallet, and it's crazy. I'm almost embarrassed about the amount of money that I've given them because they're so close. I'm like, I'm driving by Fantasy Flight, I could stop in. But they're well regarded for making some of the finest board games in the world, and especially in North America. So, what were you going to say?
I listened to a different podcast that was talking about Magic the Gathering and kind of how they corral, the supply and demand of their, franchise, I guess.
It's crazy. I mean, they're 20 years down the road. They have this very well calculated.
Yeah.
You know what's funny, too, is I don't even play Magic, but my brother-in-law is staying over. He's a younger teenage kid staying over while his parents are out of town. I was like, man, we should play some Magic. Like, I've only played, 2 games of Magic in my life, but, I feel
2
like... 2
games against Alex at PAX, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then actually, I did play one here in Minnesota, too. But it's just crazy, how, when you have a little bit of disposable income, you're like, I could try that out, but... Obviously,
I'd like to touch on that disposable income thing. I don't know, maybe that's a topic for another podcast, but yes, that is definitely a thematic element of this podcast.
I think we both fell into that loop. I mean, and it comes into being adults that play games. You need to have a very realistic view of okay, I'm going to pay the money for this game. The money's not the problem. It's the time.
Yep.
So what's the saying is like when you're younger, you have time but no money. When you're middle-aged, you have money but no time. And then when you're older, you have money. Oh, no. God, I screwed it up.
It's like energy.
Oh, it's
too.
health. It's health,
Right.
right? Yeah. Yeah, so when you're younger, you have health and time but no money. When you're middle-aged, you have health and money but no time. And when you're older, you have money and time and health and no God.
Money and time but
money
no
and
health.
time but no health. That's how it goes. Okay. God, I'm like sweating trying to figure that out.
I can smell the nipple sweat
the
from
reek.
here.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I need to write these things down before we record. That's the one thing though, is because it's so simple. Like I've always said it in company when it's come up. I always screw it up. I'm like, it's so easy.
Yeah.
I've lived 2/3 of it. I know it.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, you're right. It's definitely the money is usually no object, at least in this hobby or lifestyle, whatever you want to say. Gaming, I would argue, is definitely one of the more inexpensive things that you can do with your free time.
For sure.
Outside,
and I think that's a great podcast episode.
Yeah, like an
we could
entire
fill that up,
episode,
no problem.
yeah.
Because I'm starting to go based on strategies for myself and saying no, you can't buy this. Your life will go on. Mm-hmm. You know, like I guess the most recent thing was Battlefield Hardline. It's like, oh yeah, it looks super cool, but I know that I'm probably going to play it for about a week and not enjoy it as much, and I'll be back to playing League of Legends again.
Yeah.
I'll hop on Hearthstone, or like I've got a backlog of things that I need to play. So.
Speaking of
You just say no. That's one of the big things about being an adult too, especially with a family, is just being like, no. You need to say no to things.
Oh, you absolutely do, because otherwise you're gonna just what you do when you try and spread yourself that thin is that you don't give a game your full attention. And when I've reviewed games, I've been kind of called out for this, is that, I didn't give it enough time to kind of to percolate and kind of sit in there and kind of just get a feel for the game. But I just feel like my time is so limited that I can't afford a game any of excess. It has to catch me immediately.
Right. So speaking about that, I'm actually syncing we'll do a little bit of what you've been playing before we need to wrap up our first pilot episode here, but I think that lines up perfectly with my purchase of Bloodborne. So I've never got into Dark Souls yet. Like I've always kind of like heard the whispers about it, but now it's like, it's on people's like top 10 games of all time, like a lot of people that I respect. So this is by the same creator, it's Japanese artist or director. So it follows the same procedure. Like, you are going to die a lot, and you're going to suck at combat. And it's one of those things where, like, I'm getting frustrated. I'm like, oh my god, like, how do I beat these guys? Like, my weapons are degrading. Do I just start over a whole new game? I'm not even getting past the first zone. Super frustrating and super taxing on your mental well-being, I guess. Like, you're just like, god, I suck. Like, what am I doing here? Like, I just wasted an hour. But it's one of those things where, like, you'll get past a part that you've never got past before, and you're doing this very calculated sort of run through a place that you've played and died numerous times. And, like, I've basically pushed myself past that point of, I'm not interested in this because I've heard that there's value in it, right? And so now it's my challenge is to find the value, and I also love that sort of thing of, like, that sort of emotion, like, yes, I did it, like, I pushed myself, like, it wasn't easy, and I did it, it wasn't an immediate reward, but now I'm among the people that have beat that difficult boss. So that's also one thing that I've been doing lately with some of the newer releases is, rather than just playing League of Legends all the time, like sitting down with Monster Hunter and like these games that I might not pick up or have played in the past, like also Persona 4, a Japanese role-playing game. I haven't played one of those for a very long time, and just sort of pushing myself to, even if I don't stick with it forever, to like just play it and sort of gain consciousness about it and sort of play around with what are my expectations in gaming and in free time to, where am I finding value?
And see that value. That's how it, like I said earlier. It's kind of how I base a lot of my decisions in life is just what I get out of something. And yes, that sounds kind of really selfish and whatever, but
but it's also in most cases that we're going to be talking about. It's your money too, right?
Right. Well,
it's your hours of work,
and so. For those games, like I fail to see the point in beating my head against the wall. I'm sure there is a breakthrough point eventually, but for me, what I've found recently is it's really challenging to knuckle down and be like, okay, I'm gonna be stubborn and I'm just gonna subject myself to something that's not on its face very enjoyable, but for the broader kind of big picture, at least in my hobbies and stuff, that's a hard proposition to address, I guess.
Sitting down in a game and playing through it, almost like forcing myself to, has brought back, and then eventually not thinking about like, oh, I'm forcing myself to do it. It's just like in my mindset, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, rather than just like, no brain, sit down at the computer and just start a game of League of Legends.
Right.
I'm like, maybe and I love to do that. I'm still playing League of Legends. Maybe let's try something else. Let's just see what's out there. And so that becomes a part of your consciousness in a way. So I am doing the things that I'm sinking my teeth into, these things that I might not have done before, and I'm getting this sort of nostalgic feeling of being a kid again, like when you only had that one game,
right?
And you didn't have like 100-game backlog,
Preach it.
Where you're playing that game, and man, there's some times when you're gonna beat your head against the wall, and games are super difficult or they're super complicated for you to wrap your head around. Like you think about things like StarCraft, you think about things like sitting down to play a Zelda game that you haven't before. Like your mind now, like I've noticed my mind is so ADD. I just switch. I'm like, oh, I'll just play League of Legends. Oh, I'll play another game. But to sit down and focus and be like, I'm playing this game, and I'm going to beat it in a couple weeks. I'm going to find secret things about it, and I'm going to gain skill. That has a very nostalgic factor to me. Where, like, the only game that I'm just thinking about one game,
Yeah, so see, like, I see exactly what you're saying, and it's so funny, because, it's very empowering to feel like I'm going to get over this hurdle and I'm going to get over this obstacle and I'm going to enjoy this game. And this is probably going to happen a lot, just for the listeners. And I reference a lot of podcasts because I listen to a lot of podcasts. But this one podcast I was listening to earlier in the week was the Cracked podcast, and they were talking about I believe it was called The Economics of Addiction. And so what they had referenced in that was the Candy Crush game, and how there's no payout for playing Candy Crush. There's just little fleeting moments of satisfaction.
It's the dopamine factor, right?
That is exactly it. And so when you play games like League of Legends that you just jump in and you get a kill and you light up and you're like, oh my god, this is great, and then you get killed and you lose and you throw a game and they steal Baron or whatever.
High ups and high downs.
Yeah, and it's tough, man, but you kind of get it is addicting in that sense. You're like, I wanna ride that wave, baby. I wanna cast a good skill shot and get that kill.
Plus, it's because it's something very familiar, right?
And
you don't, since we've been playing it for 4 years at least now. I know you fell off the bandwagon a little bit, but
absolutely.
Well, actually, pretty hard, yeah. But after 4 years, the whole system is very familiar to us. So like jumping back in and me just like winning 6 games in a row as Renekton top lane, like I'm just like, Oh no, well not today, but it happened over the course of like 3 days.
Yeah,
I was playing ranked. It was like, oh, ranked is easy.
Yeah,
and Renekton top, no big deal.
And then you just get, and I don't know, man, it's very much like, it is, I think, in those games, I think they're very much designed to feed you the dopamine response like you're talking about. I don't know.
Like, for myself, if we were to get into it, we don't have much time left on the podcast here. I think we got about 5 minutes, but for me, like, the dopamine effect in that game is a result of the skill system in the game.
Sure.
Right? So that's what they tell you when you start these MOBAs. They're like, you're going to suck for a while. You better get used to it. You know, like, you got to learn like 115 champions, what they all do, what you need to watch out for. You need to learn a lot of things like about farming and about warding and all this stuff. And so the dopamine effect comes from, quite literally, several, or maybe after a year of playing the game pretty regularly, like knowing the systems and then pulling off the big plays.
Right.
That's the dopamine effect. But quite literally in things like Candy Crush and things like Flappy Bird, even, like back in that day, and then what else? Like,
even I don't know. Angry
I'm sure
Birds,
they noted some
but
of this.
that's not
Angry
like
Birds,
a microtransactions-driven game, so I wouldn't argue
not
necessarily.
wholly, yeah.
Yeah.
But those are quite literal. I mean, the big flashy ones are meant to drive you.
Yeah.
To
So
just get some more money.
Like you're saying, flashy, and I think that does play into the draw of it. When you hear the announcer saying, Penta killed, and you're just like, oh my god, I am awesome.
Yeah.
But I think they are always going to be those elements of games that are designed to bring you back, especially the ones that are the microtransaction driven. And so I think that's something that we all need to be aware of and to govern in a way.
Yeah,
mentally. So that we can have a multifaceted kind of experience within gaming. And this podcast, I think, has been kind of gaming-centric, but I do think that we are tying in kind of overarching philosophies and values that we've kind of gleaned over the years, incorporating gaming into our lives. But, I think...
and also being aware of how gaming affects our well-being in one way or another.
Our mood, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think those are very important lessons to learn and just be mindful of, because you can get into a game, and like League of Legends, I'm saying, you're not going to sit there and start yelling at your friends because you're losing in a single-player game. In a multiplayer, in a team-based setting, you're gonna tensions are
that can
rise
ruin some friendships, and we've seen it. Mm-hmm. We've seen it happen.
Yeah.
And tensions have been high. But these are the things that I think, it's topics like these that I think we're going to be talking about in the future, and sort of how, not just strictly about just games and how much we like them, but investigating how games affect us and how they fit into our lives in a healthy fashion, and to find the good that they can bring us as adults. It's very easy to see the good that it can bring a child,
Right.
Forms their brain, provides hours of entertainment, brings friends closer together. But obviously, when you're older, you definitely make trade-offs to play games when time is not as available as when we were younglings.
Yeah, that's why when you had first texted me the other day about this, I was just kind of excited because I just think it's to pursue a podcast and to touch back on what we were talking about earlier, and putting ourselves out there in and talking about our life experiences, like my dad dying and you losing your second daughter, and it's just very. I want things to be very impactful and very insightful for our listeners, and not just be a kind of ubiquitous gaming podcast and shooting the breeze over what the latest and greatest in the gaming community is.
Yeah. I think we definitely will have those, but I think it's important to keep it significant and not ambivalent,
right.
to what it is and what good can come from it. So, but thanks for listening, folks. We'd like to wrap it up at this point. Our first exciting pilot episode of examining what this podcast is going to be and focus on, and just share some stories. And we'll have more for you next time here on the Daily Grind. So my name's Sean.
And I'm Miles.
And thanks for participating